As we begin a new sermon series today for the summer, I just need to give a little bit of context what's happening as we jump into the book of Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew this morning. Jesus is beginning his ministry. He is announcing this new kingdom that he is bringing to earth. He's ushering in this new kingdom to earth. Great crowds begin to follow him, and he gathers all of these people around him, his disciples, and he sits down and he's going to preach one of the greatest, probably the greatest sermon ever recorded. It's called the Sermon on the Mount. It's found in Matthew chapters 5 through 7. And Ray kind of reminded me this morning, I encourage you over the next several weeks, read through these chapters. Get in your Bible during your personal time with God and be reading through Matthew 5 through 7 just so you can get what Jesus is trying to say to us over these next several weeks. In these first words of this first sermon in the first book of the New Testament, we're going to discover some incredible truths together. So important. We spent the summer of 2022. How many of y'all remember? We thought, as we were remembering on Friday, we were thinking that was last summer, but it was actually the summer of 2022 when we spent 8 weeks together on the Beatitudes. Do y'all remember that series from a couple of years ago on the Beatitudes? This was so important. We spent 8 weeks just on 12 verses, learning about what it looks like, what this life in the kingdom looks like, these core values for these kingdom citizens that Jesus is establishing. We learned that Jesus is going to start his sermon by addressing a question I think that all of us at some point ask. How can I be happy? Y'all ever ask that question? Maybe not out loud, but maybe on the inside, right, in your heart and mind. How can I be happy? How can I find happiness? We're all searching for the good life, right? Let me ask you, are you happy right now? I hear some yeses, but I would imagine some people here today may still be searching. You may still be searching for that happiness. Many would maybe say, I'm not sure I've ever been totally happy. It seems really close sometimes. I've seen glimpses, but I'm not sure I've found happiness. So where do we get happiness? Where do we find it? In the Beatitudes, in Matthew chapter 5, verses 3 through 12, Jesus actually gives us 8 ways to be happy. That's what we learned in the summer of 2022. 8 ways to be happy. How do I know that? Because Jesus begins each of his opening statements with blessed are, and the Greek word for blessed, it's a word, it's makarios, which literally means happy. Happy and blessed are. And then he tells us how to find that happiness. Happiness, blessedness, approval, probably best described as utmost spiritual joy. How can you find utmost spiritual joy in this life? Supreme blessedness, the highest type of well-being for human beings. And he's going to tell us right there in those verses. Does that sound good to anybody? Do you want to know the secret to happiness? It's right there in God's Word. In Matthew chapter 5, verses 3 through 12. Let me give you a quick summary. The happy people are the people who are poor in spirit, who acknowledge that you are completely dependent upon God every single minute of every single day. No matter how little I have, no matter how much I have, I am recognizing my complete dependency on God every single minute of every single day. The happy people are those who mourn, whose hearts are broken over their own sin and the sin of the world, the brokenness in the world, who are deeply saddened to the point of action. That's the key, all right? We're not just sad about it. We're saddened to the point of action and repentance in our lives. We want to do something about it. We see the brokenness, and we're not only saddened, we want to do something about it. Blessed, happy are those who mourn. Happy are the meek, who in the power of the Spirit exercise restraint. who yield their own rights for a greater spiritual purpose for the benefit of others. I have every right to respond a certain way or to act a certain way because I have power in this situation, but I'm choosing restraint for the benefit, the spiritual benefit of someone else. Happy are the meek. Happy, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, who are committed to doing the right thing no matter what. Think about it. If you're doing the right thing, if you're committed to doing the right thing, you're going to have no guilt, no regret, and a clear conscience. Doesn't that sound good? Happy, blessed are those who are committed to doing the right thing, no matter what. Happy are the merciful, the generous, the kind who get involved and take action, who lay aside their own self-interest and join in the messy, heart-wrenching world of people in pain. Again, we see the brokenness, but that's not enough. My compassion moves me to enter into that world of brokenness and hurt and pain. And I want to thank Brandon and Diane Jung this morning for doing that as we continue to pray for you. Happy are the pure in heart, who are being purified on the inside. Not this outward religion stuff, not just going through the motions and the rituals. Happy are those who are actually letting God purify you from the inside out. It's happening in my heart, at the heart level. Happy are the peacemakers. I'm not going to be a troublemaker. I'm not going to be a troublemaker. Blessed are the peacemakers who do everything possible to bring reconciliation into relationships, into lives between God and other people, between just even people within our own body. Reconcilers, happy and blessed are the peacemakers. I'm going to allow God to remake me, produce these qualities in me, even if it costs me, because blessed, happy are the persecuted for the sake of righteousness. It doesn't matter. Even if it costs me, I'm going to do what's right, even if people insult me and make fun of me. How many of y'all have seen Harrison Butker in the news, the kicker for the Chiefs here in the last several weeks, who just spoke up on spiritual things in a spiritual context, and he has been crucified in the media. They're trying to destroy him, get him fired, get him kicked off the Kansas City Chiefs just because he is expressing his belief in who God is. Jesus is redefining for us what it means to be blessed right off the bat in this sermon. This is what it means to be happy and blessed. In the kingdom, blessed has little to nothing to do with what car you drive. Being blessed in the kingdom has little to do with what your house looks like, with what job you have, or even how much money that you have in your bank account. Isn't that how a lot of us are gauging blessedness in the world today? In the kingdom, that doesn't count for anything. He's turning the world's value system upside down in this sermon. If you really want to be blessed, when Jesus speaks of a blessed person, he's talking about something more than the happiness that comes from having stuff or status or those things that we're normally chasing after. According to Jesus, happiness is not a set of circumstances. It is the fruit of a right relationship with God. When I am in right relationship with God and with others, and he is producing himself in me, these kingdom qualities, that is when I am going to find utmost joy and satisfaction in this life. And these are the first words coming out of Jesus' mouth in this sermon. It's a response to the gospel. These blessings, these benefits come into our lives. I love how Tony Evans said it. These blessings come into our lives when we are kingdom people doing kingdom work the King's way. That's when that starts flowing into our lives. if you want to experience all the favor of the kingdom, all the benefits of the king, then we have to align ourselves with him, right? When I am in doing life and I discover that I'm out of alignment, the king's values, what the king has for me is over here, but I'm walking over here, what do? I immediately repent. I repent. I acknowledge I am wrong, and I get back over here and align myself with the king. If he truly is the king, that's the question. If he truly is the king. We want to live the Jesus way. So I encourage you, if you missed that series, it's on YouTube. You could go back and you can watch every one of those sermons. And Karen, I want to set this up, all right? Let me make a bet. Karen was like, I guarantee you that nobody is going to go back and listen to those sermons. So I want y'all to prove her wrong, okay? If you missed those 8 sermons on the Beatitudes, find them on YouTube and prove her wrong and come and let me know. You know what? I watched one of those, and this is what God said to me, all right? That's just something I want to throw out there. But these 8 statements, all right, these are just the beginning of this amazing sermon. We're going to spend 9 weeks together this summer looking at the rest of this sermon. This isn't enough time. We have to finish chapter 5, chapter 6, and chapter 7 in just 9 weeks together. So we're going to be moving pretty quickly. But we want to continue to learn what this blessed life in the kingdom looks like, how we can bring ourselves under the rule and authority of King Jesus, because he is ushering in his kingdom. That's what he came to do, to bring God's heavenly rule to earth. It's what this sermon is all about. This Sermon on the Mount is all about. He's reversing the order of things. And so to follow him, we're aligning ourselves, and it's gonna look countercultural. All right? When we actually start living according to this sermon, the Sermon on the Mount, our lives are not going to look like the lives of those out in the world. See, a lot of times the lines get blurred. And we sit and we pray for people, and we look at lives and situations in our church, and our hearts are broken a lot of times because we don't look very different in a lot of ways from the world out there. But if the Spirit is at work and operating in our lives, and we are truly repenting and aligning ourselves with the King, our lives are going to look different. They're going to look different. See, adultery and lust and anger and divorce, things that he's going to address in this sermon, we got to look different than the world out there. See, we got to let him remake our hearts. And if that's not happening, then there's something wrong with what we're doing. And he's going to immediately kind of call us into question. All right? He's going to challenge us with this sermon. Jesus makes it abundantly clear right out of the gate. It's going to look different than even a lot of the religious people you know. Your life, if you're truly living according to these values, it's going to look different than even most of the religious people in your life that you know. And he calls out the Pharisee at this point, and he says, if your righteousness, if your life doesn't exceed what even the Pharisees are doing, what the religious leaders are doing, you're not going to enter the kingdom of heaven. And the audience has to be sitting there with their jaws on the floor. Wait, what? These are the best of the best. These are the guys who religiously have it all together. And Jesus said they don't, because it's all outward. It's all just religious ritual and activity and tradition. It has nothing to do with their hearts. So unless it's reaching our heart level, and then that changes the way that we think and live, then we're not going to enter the kingdom of heaven. So Jesus, in chapter 5, as he begins the sermon, he sees the crowds that are beginning to come around him, and he goes up on a mountainside, thus the Sermon on the Mount. And he sits down, and his disciples, it says, his disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. Again, I gave you a quick summary of the Beatitudes. Let me give you a quick summary of his sermon. He said, love your enemies. Give away your stuff. If someone asks you to go 1 mile, don't stop there, go 2. If someone asks you for a little, give them a lot. If somebody really offends you, just go ahead and forgive them. Forgive them. Turn the other cheek. Oh, and you can't make things right with God until you're right with the people around you. So if you're here today and you realize, you know what, I was just singing a few minutes ago, but I just realized I have somebody that has something against me. I need to leave this worship service and go make it right with them and then come back. Because until I get that right, this relationship isn't right. See, these relationships are so important. Do whatever it takes to eliminate anger and lust from your hearts. Stop staring at the little speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and clean out your own eye first. And then you'll be able to see your brother better, and then you'll really be able to help that brother or that sister. You've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Not anymore, not in my kingdom. Bless and pray for those who curse you. Don't just love those who love you back. The goal is true heart change, to become like the Father, to be perfect just as the Father is perfect. This sermon was like nothing this audience had ever heard in their lives. What? This is revolutionary. This is disturbing. What are you asking us to do? Jesus is turning their value system upside down. And in Matthew chapter 7, verses 28 and 29, it tells us when Jesus had finished saying these things, as he had wrapping up his sermon, the crowds were amazed at his teaching. Why? Because he taught as one who had authority. This, he says, is what life in the kingdom looks like. See, I have come to usher in this new kingdom, and I'm the king. So if I'm the king, I get to make the rules. This is what life in the kingdom looks like. And when Jesus comes down from the mountainside, it said large crowds begin to follow him. They're in awe of this guy, so they begin to follow him. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's go back to where we left off in Matthew chapter 5, where we're going to start today. Matthew 5, verses 13 through 16. And I don't want you to, these verses come right after the Beatitudes. And I don't want us to think of these verses as separate from the Beatitudes or even separate from the verses that follow. This is all flowing together, all right? I want us to think of this in context as we look at these verses today. Matthew 5, 13 through 16, Jesus says, "You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." Now, if you've been in church circles long enough and you've heard sermons on these verses, normally at this point, what the preacher would do for the next probably 15 or 20 minutes is talk about salt, right? And the qualities of salt and everything that salt does and everything that salt did and how it preserves and how it adds flavor and all of those things. And that's true. Every bit of that is true. That's what salt does. That's what salt does. But in this context, Jesus, I think his point is much more direct, okay? He makes that statement, you are the salt, But then he makes that statement and he goes on and explains pretty thoroughly, clearly, why he made that statement. What he begins with is what happens if we fail to demonstrate the kind of Christ-likeness that should be kind of the hallmark of his disciples. All right? This is the point he's trying to make. Jesus is saying, you're following me, you're coming to me by faith, and the transformation that comes into your life, it must be evident. It's got to be clear. People have got to be able to see it in your life. Because, and here's why, because this kingdom that I am ushering in is going to advance into the world through you. Right? You are going to be my people, my kingdom citizens. So the kingdom is going to advance through you. Jesus appears to be using salt as a metaphor for this one point, that salt that has lost its savor, right, lost its saltiness, is no longer good for anything. If salt is not being the purpose for which it was created, what do you do with it? You just toss it out. This isn't fulfilling its purpose. It doesn't even taste salty anymore, so we throw it out. In other words, a disciple who doesn't look like a disciple who isn't living like a disciple, Jesus says is worthless to the kingdom. Those are pretty harsh words right out of the gate, right? Right out of the gate. If we're not willing to be different, to come under the rule and reign of the King, to allow him to produce this in us, and it's evident to everybody around us, then what are we even doing? What are we even doing? This is the essential point. It's a warning, almost like I explained last week. It's not just about making some statement of faith, like I believe, or agreeing mentally with the facts. Oh yeah, what a great sermon. I agree with what Jesus said, but then without genuine discipleship that follows as a result of the hearing. Right? We've got to let it penetrate our hearts and lives where it produces change in us. Otherwise, what are we doing? He doesn't say you should try to be the salt of the earth. He doesn't say you should try to be the light of the world. He doesn't say if you're really faithful, if you go above and beyond, if you're really true, then you'll be salty and illuminating. He says, my people are these things essentially. If you are my people, this is who you are essentially. It's your identity. It's what I'm going to produce in you. You're going to be salty. You're going to be enlightening. It'll be clear. It'll be obvious. You're going to look different. You're going to make an impact. You're going to have a positive influence. You're going to make a difference in the world. Have you ever sat down and you started eating something and you're like, ugh, brother, ugh, right? Like, you realize immediately what's missing. What's missing? The salt, there's no flavor. Where's the flavor? Right? Where is the flavor? There's no salt. And so as Jesus looks out among us, where's the salt? Where's the salt? How are we different than anybody else out there who doesn't have the Spirit of God living in them? See, because if we've got the Spirit in us and we are under the rule and authority of the King, then we're going to look different. And our light is going to shine. And we are going to give flavor, and we are going to preserve, and we are going to do all those things that salt does. Disciples of Jesus will stand out. It's going to show up in our real life. The old things are going to start falling away because everything's new. Behold, all things are new. Those things that I didn't like to do before, now I'm finding pleasure in doing them because Christ is becoming more and more over my life. Not to draw attention to myself or to our works, but to point others to the Father. The bottom line is, unless we are distinct from the world in such a way that the world knows it, what Jesus says, even if we agree with it, doesn't really matter all that much. Doesn't really matter all that much if it doesn't make a difference in our lives. We have to be different, not odd or strange or weird or quirky. And I thought about, do y'all remember that video? Have y'all seen that video on YouTube of those people? This guy is in a suit and he's like break dancing during this musical performance. I think it's called, what's it called? Y'all remember the renewed mind is in me or something like that. Look it up. But that's not what we're talking about, all right? In our suits on Sunday morning trying to be relevant, and he's like popping and locking and break dancing like, I mean, it's cringe. It is so cringy. We're not talking about being weird or odd or quirky. We're talking about in real life, right? When the suit comes off and we're out there in the world, in real relationships, being morally and spiritually different. Right? We just look different because of Christ in us. In a world that's rotten to the core, we're the salt. In a world blinded to the truth, we're the light. By this, all the world will know that you're my disciples. There's this amazing love for God and for others just permeating out of our lives. Permeating out of our lives. Remember the Beatitudes? This is what's flowing out of kingdom people. Compassion and mercy and meekness and kindness and purity of heart. And we're broken over our own sin. And we're broken over the world's sin. And we're hungry. There's this hunger inside of us for the things of God. And we're chasing after Him. And we're seeking His kingdom first. How we love and treat others is showing His light, His love, His justice, His salvation to the world. Is this what our lives looks like? Is this what your life looks like? If not, what are we doing? We're not just people who go to church and believe good moral things. That's not who we are. We just show up and we believe and we agree. We are divine change agents in the world. That's who He's calling us to be. He says, you got to let your light so shine before men that they will see your good works and it'll point them to my Father in heaven. That's the goal. That's the end goal. Rather than this long explanation, Jesus challenges them, and then here's what He does. As soon as His sermon is over, He's like, now I said a bunch of words, but now watch me. You're going to follow me. I'm going to show you what it looks like now. All right? I'm glad y'all are following me right now. So here we go. We're leaving the church setting. We're leaving the mountainside, and we're going to walk out into the real world. Let's jump to the end of the sermon in Matthew 8. When Jesus came down from the mountainside, large crowds followed Him. Right off the bat, look at verse 2. A man with leprosy came and knelt before Him. Whew. Well, sermon's over. Sermon's over. This is real life now. This is real life. As soon as the leper shows up, what do you think that crowd did? Well, yeah, they're backing up. They're separating. They're getting as far away from this guy as they possibly can. Why? Because he's unclean. He is unclean. He even has to yell that himself. When people are getting too close, he has to let them know, unclean, unclean, so that you'll back up. You won't get too close. He's an untouchable. Things were going so well on the mountainside. But now what? Now what? And the leper says to Jesus, if you are willing, Lord, if you are willing, maybe I've tried everything else, maybe you can make me clean. Now, Jesus had just taught Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. That's big talk, right? That's big talk. So what's he going to do? You know the story. He reaches out his hand, and he doesn't just reach out his hand. He touches the untouchable. Let that sink in for a minute. He touches someone who everybody else has tried to avoid, who won't even make eye contact with, religious outcast, physical outcast, spiritual outcast, and Jesus touches this man. When was the last time he'd even been touched? And he said, I am willing. Be clean. Be clean. And immediately he was cleansed of his leprosy. And the crowd goes berserk. Wait a minute. What did we just see happen? What did we just witness? This guy is for real. He is walking his talk. He is doing for others. He's the real deal. He's actually going to live out these extraordinary values that he just taught us about a little while ago. He's going to live this out. But so they move to the next town. They move to the town of Capernaum. But then the mood's going to change again. The mood is going to shift again from amazement to, now wait a minute. Now, I understand you healing this leper, but now, Jesus, maybe this is going too far. And what happens next is going to be completely lost on us, but Matthew's people, the Jewish people, are going to understand completely what's happening here. As Jesus enters Capernaum in verse 5, a Roman centurion comes and asks him for help. A Roman centurion, and the world again stands still. This is awkward. Love your enemy. Do for others. Go the extra mile. Those were great sermon points. Those are great hashtags. But surely none of that applies to this guy. Not to this guy. Healing sick Jewish people, that's one thing, but this is an outrage. This is not some common soldier. This was a Gentile. This was a Roman. This was a centurion asking Jewish people for help. How dare he? The nerve of this guy. This is a man who had earned his rank and his authority through violence. He was appointed to this position. He obeyed without question. Centurions were harsh taskmasters who weren't afraid to dish out grueling punishment, grueling physical discipline. They would flog their own men. On occasion, they would even execute their own soldiers. This is an enemy. This is an enemy. We're supposed to hate these guys. As Jewish people, we're supposed to hate these guys. We do hate these guys. In fact, the Messiah is going to come and help us to overthrow these guys who have oppressed us for so long, the Jewish people for so long. This is the context. This is the tension. The centurion represented everything that the Jews had a right to hate. Personally, nationally, ethnically, religiously, it was all wrong. This man had blood on his hands. He had Jewish blood on his hands, and now he's asking for help. Have you ever been there in your own life? I think we've all been there, right? After what you did to me, forget about it. I'm not helping you. I'm not forgiving you. You want me to actually go an extra mile with you? You remember what you did to me a few years ago? You remember how you treated my family? I'm still holding that grudge. You want a job recommendation? Are you kidding me? You want me to give you a good recommendation? You want to borrow money? You haven't paid me back from the last time you borrowed money from me. Why would I do that? You want a second chance? This is your third second chance, and you're asking me for another one? You want to come for Thanksgiving or to the family reunion or to the graduation celebration? Have you forgotten how you treated me and our family the last time you were with us? You need to stay with someone for a while? The last time, it was 3 months. You never even said thank you when you left. Never even said thank you. Never offered to help with the bills. For some of us, there's just too much history, isn't there? Now, this is what we have in common. Isn't it true, though, that if I wanted you to help a stranger, right, to leave today and maybe somebody on the corner who's never done anything for you or to you, you'd empty your wallet for that person, wouldn't you? Because feels good. That's easy, right? Just a drive-by here. Take this, hope it helps. That's easy. But doing good for someone who hurt me, or doing good for someone who hurt someone I love, that's too much. That's too much. That's going too far. See, becoming a Christian is easy. Saying I believe, that's easy. But following Jesus, that's different altogether. That's different. Aligning yourself, bringing yourself under the rule and lordship and authority of Jesus, that's something different. That's difficult. It's supernatural, being salt and light, living out this life that Jesus is describing, the Beatitudes. This is supernatural. We got to be in relationship with Jesus under his authority. It's going to look different even from most other religious people in your life. I'm just going to go ahead and forewarn you. You're even going to stand out from other religious people, not just the world, if you live this way. But here's the thing. It's going to be evident. Whoa, there's something different about these people, about this person. It's going to be obvious that there's something different. Let's go back to our passage. The nerve of this Roman outsider, our sworn enemy. You call suffering for a living, and we have suffered for as long as we can remember. And at this point, Jesus could even gotten personal. He could have said to the centurion, look, thanks to you and your former emperor, my mother was forced to deliver me in a stable. Why would I do anything for you? Why would I do anything for you? It could be disastrous for Jesus, the zealots, the patriots in the crowd. If he helps this Roman, we're out of here. And then the mission could be over. Think about it. When rumors of this spread, but Jesus has come to introduce a new kind of kingdom. He had come to introduce a new morality, a new ethic, a new way of seeing the world, and maybe even more importantly, a new way of seeing everybody in the world. And so in keeping with his own teaching to illustrate what he had just taught, he chose to do good for someone who represented an empire that had done unimaginable harm to his people, his nation, his family. And think about it, in the end, they're going to crucify him. This regime, they're going to hang him on the cross and crucify him. And Jesus says to him, I'll do it. And he doesn't just say, I'll do it. He says, would you like for me to come to your home and heal him? I'll come to your house and I'll heal your servant. The centurion continues, and in an unprecedented expression of faith in verse 8, he says, you don't need to come to my house. You just say the word and my servant will be healed. And Jesus is amazed at this man's faith. He says in verse 13, go and let it be done to you just as you believed it would. And this man goes home and finds his servant healed. And Jesus looks at the crowd, I think, and he smiles. And he says, let's go to Peter's house for lunch. And they go to Peter's house. The crowd is stunned. He spoke as one who had authority. His words are matching his deeds. He is nothing like the current religious leaders. Nothing like the current religious. He wasn't kidding. Those were more than just sermon points that he was talking about. He actually expects us to do good for those who don't do good for us. He actually expects us to literally do good for those who don't look like us or live like us. He expects us to do good for people who don't even like us. And he's not just talking it, he's doing it. He's showing us how to do it. So back to us, it's no wonder that we reduce our faith to just a label, right? It's no wonder that we show up, we take some notes during the service, and then just retreat out there back to what's comfortable. Because it's easier to be a churchgoer than to be a Jesus follower, a true disciple. But Jesus says, listen, if you're my people, you are salt and light. You are salt. You are light. You have said yes to my kingdom values of humility and forgiveness and generosity and love and mercy, and that's what's going to renew all of creation. It's not taking up arms. We're going to restore creation through love and mercy and love. This is where heaven and earth are combined. Love for God, love for our neighbors, and not just some neighbors, right? Not just some. Love for God and for our neighbors. This is where his people failed him in the Old Testament. Remember when God told his people in Isaiah 49:6? He said, I will make you a light to the Gentiles, and you will bring my salvation to the ends of the earth. Did they do that? No, they rebelled against him. They lived for themselves. They didn't look anything different from the people around them. And he said, but I set you up to be a light to the nations. And now he's sending his son Jesus, and he's going to usher in a new covenant and a new kingdom. And Jesus says in John 8:12, okay, I am the light of the world. I am the light of the world. I'm going to show you the way. If you want to know how to do this, I'm going to show you the way, how to make a difference. Come and yoke up with me, learn from me, follow my words and example. I'm going to show you. And that's exactly what he does throughout his entire ministry. If you want to know how to do this, just continue reading the book of Matthew and Mark and Luke and John. And then put it into practice. To follow the example of Jesus, we have to live as he lived. We have to do more of what he did. We have to spend more time, not less, with the people that he did. You remember the description of Jesus in the New Testament? He was a friend of sinners. See, that was meant to be an insult. But it was actually a compliment, because that's exactly why he came, to seek and to save the lost. So of course he's going to be a friend of sinners. But that happens out there, doesn't it? In the world, in the culture, in our spheres of influence, in our domains, in our families, where God has placed us, living as kingdom disciples. That's where it happens, in those relationships, in those real life choices and decisions and relationships. That's where it happens. If not, Jesus says, what are we doing? Then what are we doing? If salt is not salty, if light is not piercing the darkness, we're not serving our purpose. We have to love others. We got to go that extra mile. We got to treat them the way that we want to be treated. Love mercy. Forgive. Be a reconciler. Hunger for what's right. We got to be obvious. We got to look different. You come into contact, as we close today, with an average of 30 people a day. 30 people a day. There are probably a little over 100 people in here today. So that is, as soon as we walk out these doors, as soon as we come down from the mountainside, right, like they did, and we hit real life, and real life hits us, and we run into the leper, and we run into the Roman centurion, and we run into the family members that ticked us off, and we run into this relationship that isn't right, and we run into this area of our lives that's not submitted under the rule and authority of Jesus. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? This is our opportunity to let our light shine in the darkness, to make an impact for the King. It's what Jesus desperately needs you to be. He wants you to go and be who he made you to be. That's my prayer for you today. Let me pray for you.